This is 20 versus 1 Speed Edition in Football Manager. So the concept for this 20 versus 1 in Football Manager is inspired by Sidemen 20 versus 1. But essentially, in these videos, I'm going to take one attribute, and I'm going to make that attribute 20 for every player for the team that is supposed to finish last. And then for the team that's supposed to finish in first place, I'm going to give that attribute 1 for all of those players, and we're going to see how it affects each of their performances throughout the season. So for example, Manchester City is supposed to finish in first place in the English Premier Division this season. So I'm going to go through each of their players, and I'm going to edit all of their players so that their pace is 1. And we're going to do that for the entirety of the Manchester City squad. On the flip side, Bournemouth in the season preview are predicted to finish in 20th or last place. So I'm going to go through and I am going to make all their players have a pace of 20. So this is going to be the 20 versus 1 in Football Manager. We're taking Bournemouth, predicted to finish in 20th place, and we're giving every first team player a pace of 20. And on the flip side, we're going to Manchester City, the team that's supposed to finish first, and we're giving every first team player a pace of 1. And we're going to see how that affects two teams throughout the season. So I'm going to go through, change the paces for every player in both of those teams, and I will see you all again once I have completed that. Welcome back. Every player in Man City now has a pace of 1. So Erling Haaland has a pace of 1, Kevin De Bruyne has a pace of 1, and going all the way down to Cole Palmer, who's still at Man City in this edition of the game, he has a pace of 1. So now every player on Man City has that pace of 1. On the flip side, Bournemouth are now the fastest team in the world, as every player on the team has a pace of 20. From Neto to Jefferson Lerma, all the way down to Junior Stanislas, every single player in Bournemouth have a pace of 20. And it is already really interesting to see how this has affected the game, because if we go to the season preview for the English Premier Division now, City, who were predicted to finish first, have now dropped down to being predicted to finish third, while Bournemouth, who were predicted to finish 20th, are all the way up to being predicted to finish in 12th. So pace and speed in this game, it shows how important it is because it has drastically affected the season previews already. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how both teams adapt to having either slow or fast players, because Man City like to keep possession. So you would think that they might not be so bad, even though each player has a pace of 1, because they're still able to keep the ball, still able to work the ball around. They might get hit on the counterattack, but they should still be able to score a lot of goals by virtue of keeping a lot of possession. On the other hand, Bournemouth are much more likely to play on the counter, where having a really fast team could help them to score a lot more goals. So there we have it. That is 20 versus 1 Speed Edition. We're going to simulate one season into the future, and we're going to see how Man City and Bournemouth stack up against each other. So I'm going to simulate forward, and we will see you all at the end of the season. So we're actually back in February really quick because I wanted to show you guys something I thought that was very interesting. So Man City have identified that their team is slow because they have gone through and signed some of the fastest players in the world. Adama Traore was signed from Wolves. It must be purely because of pace, because he has 20 pace and 20 acceleration. We have, of course, changed that back to a 1 of pace since he was signed for Man City. But very interesting how they've identified the need for speed, so to speak. And they've also signed Rafael Leao, another player who is very quick. But again, this is a player who we've changed to a pace of 1 now that he's playing for Man City. So again, very interesting to see City signing these players that I don't know if they would have ordinarily signed just because their team is so slow. But that's where we're at right now. Again, we're in February. I'm going to simulate to the end of the season. And again, I will catch you all at that point in time. Welcome back. We are at the end of the season, and the slowest team ever finished 9th in the English Premier Division, so completely nerfing the pace in Man City squad. Ended up making them a mid-table side, which isn't too bad, all things considered. But I think the real story is that making Bournemouth the quickest team in the world made them finish seventh. Are they maybe a little disappointed given how close they were to miss out on European football, with Leicester getting the Europa Conference League despite being relegated, and Tottenham finishing sixth and getting that last Europa League spot? Maybe a little bit unlucky to finish outside of the European places, but Bournemouth, with the fastest team in the world, they ended up finishing seventh, and it only took making every single player to have 20 pace while nerfing all of Man City's players to have one pace for them to actually be better than the current champions of England. And looking at their season, I mean, they had a pretty decent season, I think, all things considered. September through October, going undefeated after 3 losses in 5 Premier League games to start August. But Bournemouth got a lot better throughout the season. And then it looks like maybe they had a little bit of a rough run here, but ending the season very well, only 1 loss after their first match in April. And looking at how they did against Man City, because I was curious, they beat Man City at home 2-1. And how did they do in the first match against Man City as well, but losing 1-0 away? So the two teams were very even, splitting across the 2 games, and both teams scoring 2 goals and allowing 2 goals against each other. You know what? When you just change the pace of each team, they ended up being very equal throughout the season. Very interesting. And here we are looking at Manchester City. Despite having pace of 1, they still managed to win the Community Shield, very interestingly, but a really rough start to the season. Maybe not adapting too well to everyone having a pace of 1, but they actually came on much better towards the I was about to say they came on much better towards the end of the season. This middle road here, where they won a lot of games, they did quite well, but a really rough end to the season. They must have been much higher, but getting knocked out in the Europa League round of 16, obviously getting knocked out in the group stage of the Champions League, and having a really rough end to the season. Maybe a little bit disappointing for them, but I think a 9th place finish with the slowest team ever in the English Premier Division isn't too bad, all things considered. And I think, all things considered, very impressively, Erling Haaland, despite having a pace of 1, still ended up finishing second for the top goal scorer award with 18 goals and 2 assists. But also interestingly, Ryan Christie ended up finishing third. One of the players on Bournemouth who ended up having that pace of 20 catapulted him into the top goal scorer conversation. 2 very interesting results there as well. Well, there you have it. That is 20 versus 1 Speed Edition in Football Manager. We completely nerfed the speed of all of Manchester City's players, and it turns out they still ended up being a mid-table club. But Bournemouth were able to overtake them, as we gave them essentially the fastest team in the game, just barely missing out on one of the European places, but overall a really solid season for them. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this Football Manager experiment, a little twist on 20 versus 1 videos that are, all over YouTube at this point. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you all are having a wonderful week, and I will see you all next time. Bye.